What if Sam Pittman loses his job at Arkansas? Would Tennessee be wise, given their issues at offensive tackle, to make a run at him? Because now that he's proven that he could be a head coach, not a successful head coach, but a head coach, he might be completely comfortable with just coaching an offensive line, especially one that has some money behind it where you can go out and get guys in NIL. Your thoughts on that? Quality Tire Pros, the Eberle family has been serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All work covered by nationwide warranty. QualityTirePros.com, QualityTirePros.com. Right down below, tell Bo that Off the Hook Sports and Dave said hello. How crazy would that be? Or am I being too hard on Glen Elarbee?
I don't think that'd be crazy. Here's the only issue, and it's a big one too, which is the way Tennessee's offense is constructed. Now maybe it's not, because Tennessee gets under center for a team that plays out of the shotgun and goes tempo. They're getting under center for short yardage plays. Are they doing it more than anybody else you're seeing in college football right now, Dave? They are for me. I don't see anybody getting under center as much as Tennessee.
For a team that's offense is based out of the gun, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not under center more than Army or Navy.
No, they're not. That's true. You're right. But yes, for an offense based out of the gun, they're getting under center more than anybody I've seen. So maybe Sam Pittman would be able to step in. But for Tennessee's offensive line, guys, for those who don't know, there's two ways to coach offensive line in the new schemes in college football today. There is teaching how to play with your hand in the ground and maintaining blocks, which was, that's what Philip Fulmer lived by, wasn't it? More than anything else. And then there is what Peyton Manning kind of developed in Indianapolis, which is I don't need offensive linemen to maintain their blocks. I need them to dictate the direction of the defensive line so I can step in a certain way in the pocket and make the right throw. That's all I need them to do.
I guess
Heupel's coaching is more on that realm.
Agreed. I guess what I'm asking, though, is how much blame do you put on the offensive tackles on Glen Elarbee, Tennessee's offensive line coach?
A ton. Look, and again, maybe the problem is that Glen Elarbee, maybe the big problem is that Glen Elarbee does come from a more physical coaching style of the offensive line. Again, the issue is that, yes, I put it on Josh Heupel because of his arrogance and his belief that he can make anybody work. But again, Glen Elarbee is the offensive line coach. Not one player that Tennessee has signed out of high school has made it to start under Glen Elarbee. No matter how you slice it, that's a huge red flag. Now, that could be one of two things. That could be Glen Elarbee, but it's only one of two things, Dave. It's either Glen Elarbee's coaching or it's Josh Heupel blatantly missing on the guys he's going after. But, Dave, don't you think if Josh Heupel's missing that Glen Elarbee has a hand in that? I don't think Josh Heupel makes a decision on which offensive lineman to sign without talking to Elarbee, right?
No, the only coach that I've known that did that was Butch Jones, and it's because if they had an extra star next to their name, he was going to take them regardless of it. His entire staff could tell him they were horrible, but a recruiting service could fall in love with him and they would take him.
Dave doesn't believe in Butch ball, guys.
No, I don't. That's really going out on a limb, isn't it? Okay, let me ask you this. Who do you blame most for Tennessee's offensive tackle issues? Is it Heupel, Elarbee, or the players? Because I blame the players and injuries. I think that John Campbell Jr. would be a very good player if not for the fact that he has the bursa sack issue that seems to crop up in every game. I think Lance Hurd has just not lived up to the billing. So me personally, I would rank the players and injuries way over Heupel and Elarbee.
Well, this is another red flag on Heupel. So there's two big red flags on Josh Heupel. And they've been around, Dave, since 2022, 2021, and we just haven't brought it up. One has been around since 2021, one emerged itself in 2023. The first red flag, we talk about it, player evaluation. He's missed on way too many people. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
The second...
Well, specifically in the offensive line. Are you talking specifically in the offensive line or all in all?
I think all in all. Again, I'm never... Joe Milton over Hendon Hooker. I'm always going back to that. That's player evaluation. At the end of the day, that is a failed evaluation that anybody with eyes probably could have seen differently. And I will not believe him for the rest of eternity that Joe Milton outperformed Hendon Hooker in practice. I don't believe it. And by the way, I've heard from you and some other people he lost in 2021 too because the players thought Hendon Hooker was better too. So now that's the first one. The second one, and this is a big one, his strength and conditioning program. I feel like he's mismanaging the health of players. This is the second year in a row where we keep saying, well, it's not a big deal because health, we got to give him a break because health is an issue here, health is an issue there. I mean, we can talk about him mismanaging Cooper Mays. Keenan Peele has back-to-back season-ending injuries. I don't think that's necessarily on the... That's not fair. That's not fair. Okay. But John Campbell and Lance Hurd both getting hurt, it just seems like Squirrel White being banged up, the receivers, every year the top receivers keep getting injured. I mean, Brew McCoy got hurt Dante Thornton got hurt on a block 2 weeks ago at Arkansas.
Okay, but here's my issue. If it's strength and conditioning, I mean, that we can talk about that. But to me, that's more oftentimes pulled muscles and those sorts of things, torn pectoral muscles. Now, you did have the triceps injury with Keenan Pili last year that I thought could have been due to poor strength and conditioning. Those are the type of injuries I'm talking about. Lance Hurd with an ankle sprain, I can tell you that they barely had him practice during preseason. So they went the opposite way in that regard. Now, I'll say this. I think that Tennessee's practices are too soft. And maybe that makes you not as physical in games. But I think all of college football's practices are too soft for the most part. I think anybody could go out there and just break the rules and do the old 2-a-days thing, and they'd probably go out there and at least make the college football playoff with an average team. I mean, as much better as I think the play is across the board, I do think it's a little bit softer across the board, not just at Tennessee, but all schools.
Oh, I think it's much, much softer across the board. I agree, but I think Josh Heupel takes that to a... Okay, here's the thing. The criticism of Josh Heupel that we're levying right now, Dave, is very similar to... It's funny because I'm going to bring up another Tennessee player. When Peyton Manning was in the NFL, and he and Tom Moore developed that offense, the freeze offense, Peyton Manning spent his entire career, his whole focus was outsmarting other teams, right? And don't you think that was a problem with him in the playoffs? Because once the playoffs comes and the game gets more physical and it slows down, it's harder to just outsmart players on the other side, right? Because they can just simplify their defense, and they're just more physical.
It's harder to outsmart players, and you also have 16 games to figure things out on. So I think as the season went on, he was more predictable. Now, I think he certainly changed up the freeze plays and the calls in the Omaha, and it meant one thing one week and another thing the other. But there's in-game adjustments, and I've heard it's either Rodney Harrison or the linebacker that played for the Patriots that said they felt like they had a really good idea of what Peyton Manning was going to do a good bit of the time.
Well, they were spying on them too because they're the Patriots. But to be fair, but I mean the reason I bring all that up is because there was the mantra that once the smarts is gone, the Colts or the Broncos were just too finesse to win, right? They just didn't have the physicality to win, and I think that you worry about that with Heupel. So to your point with Glen Elarbee, is he kind of at fault? I think he could be. I think the system in general is just finesse, but this just brings us back to player evaluation. Maybe Glen Elarbee is the problem, but do you think Sam Pittman would fix it? He was Tennessee's offensive line coach in 2012, and Tennessee had a historically great offense that year. Unfortunately, they hired one of the most brilliant men ever in Sal Sunseri to run the defense. But
I told you what I was told about Sal Sunseri, right?
Not good with people, not very bright.
Yeah. And thank you, Timothy, for contributing. He says, hey, better have full stadium for the orange and white game. I mean, I think that he's talking about the Alabama game, but we appreciate you contributing to Quincy Calhoun's college fund. All of that goes to Quincy, and I have to trust Caleb, who has been labeled a gambling degenerate on this program, but it was by me. So I have to trust Caleb that it all goes to his college program, but I trust Caleb with a lot, so I'm not worried about that. All right, so let's get a reset on this poll question that I think is pretty good, and then I'm just going to ask you flat out, if you could, would you trade Glen Elarbee for Sam Pittman, like tomorrow? 60 seconds from TriStar Hats, and use the promo code HOOK to get 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co. What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Ah, gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited.
Elias says not tomorrow. Elarbee traded for Pittman because of the scheme issues, but if he knew the system, I'd seriously consider it. Spiffy says, has he ever yelled at anyone is the question.
He doesn't look like he yells. I mean, that's a good point. He doesn't look like he yells. I mean, you're never going to see that meme of Heupel like you saw with Saban when Tennessee played Alabama 2 years ago and Alabama fumbled that punt and you saw Saban just lose everything on the sideline. Remember that?
Timothy says players would leave if you yell at them. I will say this. Philip Fulmer only yelled at offensive linemen that he wanted to leave. And there was one in particular, and he passed away, so God rest his soul. But do you remember Heath Benedict?
I actually know the name.
Okay. He ended up transferring up to school in the Northeast, and he ended up being what projected maybe a first-round pick, and I think passed away for some reason right before. But it was obvious Philip Fulmer wanted him to go because he screamed and yelled at him and called him about every name in the book, and that wasn't the Fulmer way. So I think you can motivate people without yelling, especially on the offensive line. It's a little bit more of a thinking man position. Now, if Ed Orgeron wants to yell at his defensive line, then certainly he should do that. Give us an update on the poll question, Caleb.
All right.
There are a lot of hooker polls. I noticed that.
Who do you most blame for Vols offensive tackles? Heupel, Elarbee, players and injuries. 44% Elarbee, 31% players and injuries, 24% Heupel. I wanted to set up the poll question you actually just asked, which is, would you trade Glen Elarbee for Sam Pittman straight up?
I would trade Glen Elarbee for Sam Pittman in a heartbeat. I think Sam Pittman's one of the better offensive line coaches in the country, and I think Glen Elarbee is just okay.
I would absolutely not trade Glen Elarbee for Sam Pittman because Sam Pittman has not ever coached in a spread offense where you play with your hands up. Every single system he's ever coached in, from Brett Bielema to Derek Dooley to Butch Davis, has been to Jim Chaney and Kirby Smart, has been you play with your hand in the ground the whole time, and Tennessee doesn't coach that. So I think that he would be useless coaching in this offense.